Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Clock Talk with Dr. Greg Brennan. Today, we're going to talk about carbohydrates. Are you ready?
I just had my sugar. I'm ready.
All right, here we go.
All right.
So over the last few years, we've heard a lot about intermittent fasting. We heard a lot about keto diets. We heard a lot about carnivore diets, and a lot less talk about carbohydrates during that time frame. And I think we've also confused, carbohydrates with just this sugar that's inundating our food supply at this point in time. So I kind of wanted to cover carbohydrates today and, learn a little bit more about that and understand what good carbs are compared to bad carbs and et cetera, et cetera. So first and foremost, what is a carbohydrate?
Carbohydrate is a molecule, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Glucose is the simple one. It's a 6-ring sugar. A complex carbohydrate is a chain of them. Your body stores them as glycogen in muscle and liver. Complex, we're going to go some things here because I'm a huge believer in intermittent fasting. Huge believer in, I'll say, keto diet. I've been following Dr. Mercola for years. We had Sean Baker on our podcast, which I went fasting when I read Primal Blueprint in 2011, Changed My Life by Mark Sisson. But Mercola walks through this, that yes, we gotta do those things. The last few have been great because we are so inundated with insulin resistance. Mercola is very clear. It's after you get out of that, because you want, and Mark Sisson talked about this now, his new book, 2 Meals a Day, is you want to be metabolically flexible. You want to use fat for energy and sugar for energy at the proper time. You really don't want to use protein for energy. It's the last source. And what's happening is when we in the ketotic state, I'll go over in a minute the chemistry on that, but the ketotic state or long after fasting, after you stop being insulin resistant, there are certain cells in the body that still need sugar, so that need the simple molecule, the brain. And what happens is the body goes to places like muscle, bone, and brain to break down muscle, lean muscle, to make. It also does something else. In a low sugar state, we think of cortisol being stress, flight or fight. We think about it as storing fat, which it does, but its primary function is to get sugar into the bloodstream. So in a chronically hypoglycemic state, after you've turned insulin resistance around, your body's going to start breaking down things. And Mercola goes through, it's called the Randall cycle. Very, very, very great stuff. I think the benefit of everything we're doing with the sugar part we're doing is that, first off, the standard American diet, Jason Funk called that in his book, Obesity Code, calls it SAD, SAD, obviously, is that the 3 meals a day, 3 snacks a day, and the complex carbohydrates, that's all the problem. You want to put the food in a time frame. I was more of a 4 to 6 hour window. Mercola was as well, but now he's more of an 8 to 12 hour window because, again, it's important to understand that there's this rate limiting step called pyruvate dehydrogenase. When this thing called a Krebs cycle. Krebs cycle, it really is a cycle. And sugar comes in at points and fat comes in at points to make a thing called acetyl-CoA. And acetyl-CoA becomes more sugar. So glucose is 6 carbons. It gets divided in half, and that makes pyruvate, which then becomes acetyl-CoA, jumps in the cycle. That's if you turn sugar into that. Fat does the same thing, breaks down to acetyl-CoA, and it gets to the Krebs cycle. The Krebs cycle is the key. That is the energy source of ATPs within the mitochondria. Now, if you have excess sugar built up outside of that pathway because all your diet is fat, then what happens is the extra sugar, something's got to happen with it. It turns into glycogen, gets stored. It turns into fat to get stored. But what happens is now your body may start using it as glycolysis and makes more ATPs out there in a more inefficient way. It makes 2 ATPs. Within this cycle, it makes 38 ATPs. So what he talks about is really clear is you want enough fat coming in and sugar coming in at the same time so the gate goes properly. He says optimum around 30% fat, which is a good, again, it's a lot better than the American diet. We recommend 15% fat. So again, it's still fat. I'm not getting anti-fat. It's the idea of what happens is when you hit a wall. He talks about hitting a wall. When you've done your stuff. So he found in his own body, he actually gained 10 pounds of muscle and decreased more 10 pounds of fat as blood sugar went better. It's this oxymoron state that we can't believe sugar actually helps. And it's simple sugars, being at one molecule, because the complex carbohydrates are terrible for your gut biome. They actually increase the bad bacteria that increases an endotoxin called LPS, which increases inflammation and increases problems with cortisol.
Okay, so what are some examples from a simple standpoint of good carbs
fruit juice
compared to
fruit juice, and then start your body? It's okay. This is really important though. After you got rid of insulin resistance, okay,
so let's talk about that. How do you do that?
You go carnivore, you go fasting, everything we talk about, all those
then
books.
You reset your body.
Resetting your body so it's flexible. I love that phrase that Mark Sisson uses, that your body's flexible. There are times you want to use fat for energy. There's times you want to use sugar for energy. Being flexible. But certain cells do more dominate, and they like sugar. So it's not, I think if you err on one side, the one side I'd err on more fat, more protein than has been successful in my life. But so once that's done, because he talks about probably 3-4 years ago, Dr. McCullough started getting in, and he used to eat 50 grams of carbs, went to 100. He talked about doing ketosis, fasting, and cycle back with carbohydrates, cycle about every 3 month cycle, which seemed to make sense. So myself, I was doing about 12, 18 months ago, I started doing that. I found out a little bit more energy, and it allowed me to keep lean weight up. That very important. It kept my weight up and my waist down still, because waist is the risk factor. That's stored the visceral fats is the crucial. I'm very interested because McCullough's been doing this for about 3-4 weeks now. I'm very interested to see, because Sean Baker, carnivore guy who wrote the book, he's brilliant. His articles are phenomenal. I'm waiting to hear Sean and Mark Sisson and Dr. Fung. I'm ready to hear what they have to say too, because it is he's like Dr. McCullough's like the guru of this stuff. And he goes, 40 years I've been doing this way. But it's just, I found we're having not perfect success. So I'm thinking it's very interesting that this might be the future way. And basically what it is, it's the way we used to eat. So a simple sugar is important, because now not pure fructose, because fructose is, your liver can't digest it. Fructose is terrible. That's the cause of non-alcoholic liver, hepatitis, cirrhosis of the liver. So it's bound within the fruit. He actually talks what he does. He eats 4 to 5 pounds of watermelon in the morning, then eats 3 eggs, and then eats some rice and some maple syrup, drink some maple syrup. It's like 450 grams of carbs in a day. Completely different. But I think the science really makes some sense.
So we talked earlier about, you mentioned fruit juice. That's a bad.
No, that's a good.
Okay. Well, simple. Real fruit juice.
Yeah, real fruit juice. Yeah, this is the thing. The food we eat today is so processed. In Europe, glyphosate is illegal. In Europe, you could, it's a different system. My wife has terrible gluten allergies. We were there for the summer, and she ate pizza and pasta every day and came back 7 pounds lighter with no belly pain. So yes, Jim, what we call food sometimes is not food. Look at Subway, the famous case in Ireland. Their bread's considered sugar. It's not real bread. Either there's tuna fish genetically. So what we eat is really, really important. And how we eat is important, because metabolism by definition is turning food and energy. So you need a good source of food. I'm a huge believer in grass-fed red meat, free-ranged eggs, fruit. These are things we eat for 6,000 years. The problem is the processing of it to make it, the herbicides, the pesticides, to help. I'm not saying that, their event was to make things bad, but the byproduct of that is bad. When you have different GMOs on that changes our gut. Jim, there's thousands of molecules. We have no idea. They can't even test them. I think I read something since World War II, there's been 70,000 new chemicals out like every 6 or 7 years. It's like, you can't even test them. The test is going on now. Now, one result that we know that we put in an environment that's really important is fertility risk. I used to be an OBGYN. It's called a fundability rate, is decreasing tremendously in populations. sperm count since 1970 in North America, Western Europe, New Zealand, Australia has decreased 1% per year. In 2002, it's increased to 2% per year. Add that up, that's compounded, that's tremendous. Testosterone levels when I was in school 40, 50 years ago, a low male was around 700. Today they consider a low male under 170 because it's a sick population. What happens is these xenoestrogens, these plastics, these fake estrogens, what they do is they trick the body not to produce testosterone. And then that's this cascade of events that lead to infertility. But understand something, testosterone is the most abundant hormone in the human body. It doesn't affect fertility, it affects every single cell in the body.
Let's talk about the metabolism and carbohydrates and how the carbos affect the metabolism.
Okay. So a carbohydrate is, again, a carbon, hydrogen, oxygen molecule. It's a hexagon. It gets divided by a thing called pyruvate dehydrogenase, which makes it into 2,3 molecule. This is important. When that pyruvate turns into acetyl-CoA, and it's all carbohydrates, goes into the Krebs cycle, okay? It's much more efficient. It does a couple of things. Instead of making just 2 ATPs, it makes 38 ATPs. It also produces an essential nutrient, carbon dioxide. Don't listen to these politicians, garbage. Carbon dioxide is an active stimulant to make more mitochondria more efficient. Okay, that's its pathway. When carbohydrate is divided into pyruvate, the 3 molecule again, but it turns into energy within the cytoplasm, it turns into a thing which you felt before, lactic acid. Lactic acid, muscle cramp, because it's less efficient. Also, lactic acid increases a tremendous increase in inflammation. So the waste product of a carbohydrate in the cytoplasm, like glycolysis, is not just only gives you 2 ATPs, 80 times less energy. It also has a terrible byproduct. Pyruvate going down acetyl-CoA gives you carbon dioxide, the sustaining molecule of life, and it gives you energy. That's a carbohydrate. Now, the thing is, if your body's not, if you've been insulin resistant, all kind of stuff, that's important to get through that. But your microbiome of your gut is so destroyed by pesticides, herbicides, plastics, xenoestrogens, that these bad bacteria grow that actually release a molecule called LPS. And this LPS is an endotoxin, which increases inflammation. So that's why fixing the gut bacteria is very important, because that's the barrier to everything. It's like the skin of the inside. We need that barrier strong. You need the mucus, you need the membranes tight. And that's why it's important. So your body, McCullough talks about, you got to readjust your body to be exposed back to sugars, but start simple first. He recommends fruit juice and watermelon. Go work way to fruit, but stay away from complex for a while because of the problem of the endotoxins. Your gut bacteria changes.
Is there for example, in his meal that he talked about with the protein and the fruit and what have you, is there a process of order?
Yes,
of
order.
eating that?
He starts 5:30 in the morning with 4 to 5 pounds of watermelon. Then he does his 3 eggs. Then he does his rice, and then he does his maple syrup in that order for the morning meal. So throughout the day, it's 450 grams of carbs. Again, which is before I read this, again, I was increasing. I probably got to 150 grams of carbs throughout the day via fruit myself. But I've also had a thing called tart cherry juice, real tart, that lowers uric acid. I think we've talked about in a previous podcast about the methylation of vitamins. Mm-hmm. And a byproduct of your body not being able to methylate is a thing called homocysteine. And another byproduct is uric acid. Those are extremely bad for cardiovascular disease. And there's some studies. There's a great book called Drop Acid by Dr. Peter Mueller, who wrote the book Grain Brain. He talks a whole study on that. So I've been adding juice for myself during that process because of helping the kidneys out. But it appears that the idea is to have enough sugar there that's simple to do the processes to get the right bacteria in our gut again.
Interesting. So this tart cherry juice, how does that work?
It has to do with a molecule. I forgot the name of the molecule. I can't pronounce it. That actually helps clear out uric acid. I forgot what the number is. I think about 7 or 8, but you want to keep it, whatever they say it is, you want like under 4. Markers like uric acid, homocysteine, C-reactive protein, these are ferritin, these are markers of inflammation. And the biggest inflammation, again, is molecules that increase. Electrons must be in pairs. And when they're separate, that creates free radicals called inflammation. Example, vitamin C donates 2 electrons. That's why it's a great antioxidant. Vitamin E donates 1. You want to eliminate the byproduct of this omega-6 fatty acid, and vitamin E protects that. Glutathione recycles both the vitamins. So it all goes to, it really is just physics of the anatomy. Keep the electrons paired up. Inflammation, long-term is brutal, short-term is life-saving.
Another fast 15 minutes with Dr. Greg Brennan. Thank you.
Thank you.